Dollar Podcast. $billion ideas, $billion topics, $billion companies. This is the show you got to be listening to. We are like officially radio here. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, we are.
Guys, if you're not watching, like, what are you doing? You can't be listening to this anymore. You've got to see the experience. I mean, how much fun did you have last week watching our episode?
The 3 times I watched it, yeah, I had a great.
Did you actually watch it 3 times? I watched it once, and I thought it was awesome. I mean, so much fun. And we've got our pad here, so you guys get to see how we actually record. We've got our Aaron Rodgers jerseys. We're in studio. I mean, I think I'm just naturally going to shift towards radio. Like, I think this is just radio vibes. No,
no, video vibes though. On
video
YouTube.
vibes, yeah, but like video radio, like I'm thinking Colin Cowherd. Are you a Colin Cowherd fan?
I'm a big Cowherd fan.
I'm a huge Colin Cowherd fan, and you know, I think the one thing I love about Colin Cowherd is how much he. Do you know how much he preps for his shows?
None.
No, he preps for hours.
Does he?
Yeah, he gets to the studio 4 hours before his show and sits with his team. And they do research. Like, it's incredible. I mean, Colin Cowherd is one of the best people in sports media, I think. And obviously so mainstream.
The metaphors he uses are so funny. Like how he starts each show with a metaphor. Like how the Kansas City Chiefs offensive like strategy has to do with like how you parent or something.
Yeah,
He makes these ridiculous analogies.
And as a divorced person, I love that he talks about that on air. I mean, it's just so many things I love about Colin Cowherd, you know, and so I'm gonna do a Colin Cowherd line here.
Nice.
I'm gonna give the audience a preview of what they're gonna be getting today. So we have an ad from our sponsor upcoming, followed by some light banter up until the 15-minute mark, where we're gonna have a 15-minute COVID corner, followed by the rest of the show, which we have a case study on Narcos, and then we'll be doing a land deal in real estate.
Nice.
So see that like that whole like if listen to what you want.
And first announcement here, we haven't had a question in 2 weeks. Now, the questions are moving to bdppod.com.
$billion podcast pod.com.
Yeah.
BDP.
So please shoot in the questions. Evan, Graham, Ryan, all our people, get back in here. We need your questions.
Do you think that they just forgot the link, or what is it?
It could make some confusion with the name change, no longer being DFWB. So bdppod.com, bring them in. We're recording next on a Thursday, I believe.
So we'll have a long week here.
Yeah, we have a long Thanksgiving break. A happy Thanksgiving. Hope you all had a great holiday. Everyone who's listening and watching.
No. We're recording on Tuesday again next week.
Okay, so Tuesday next week.
Yeah, because I'm out of town. I leave on the Wednesday.
Gotcha.
All right. So our sponsor today is, so if you were listening to the show, we upload on YouTube on Friday. And so, you know, the thing that's been going on in the media right now is the censoring of content.
Sure is.
And so, you know, we are a show that tells the truth, always, which is why we did not talk about the PAC, did not cover, because that does not fit our narrative of pro Aaron Rodgers jerseys. So the Packers is not a topic of conversation.
They're 9-2 against the spread.
We are an objective show.
9-2 against the spread. All right, that's brilliant. They're doing great.
So we stay on narrative.
Yeah.
And one of our narratives is a little controversial, the COVID corner segment. We have 15 minutes of COVID. And so we put up our ad on what is the 3rd most visited website. Do you know what that is? YouTube. So Google is the most visited, Facebook 2, YouTube 3. And Google owns YouTube. So really they have 1 and 3 in my mind. I'm a big Google fan. And so YouTube doesn't take down our episode.
I know. I was worried for a bit. When I originally sent to our producer here, John, he mentioned that there was going to be a COVID link on our video, which you can all see when you go to video. To learn more about COVID, click this link under our video.
Yeah, don't listen to our show to learn about COVID.
No.
Click on the COVID learning link. Does it take you to the CDC page?
I didn't click on it.
Yeah, the horrendous link under our video is courtesy of YouTube. And so if you're listening to this on YouTube, there's many features. You can have the little like gear icon in the lower right. You can fast forward. If you want to listen to me and watch us at 1.5 times, you can. And you know what's on top of that is if you want to learn about COVID, there's a very handy link right below. So shout out to the people at YouTube for not removing it, and unshout out YouTube for putting a COVID link at the bottom of our show. That's our sponsor for today. This show is brought to you by YouTube and YouTube TV, a great subscription service.
The best. Love YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube TV. You can DVR. It's a great replacement for cable. Way more sports. Just everything YouTube TV, YouTube, COVID learning link. That's our sponsor for today.
What a great company.
Yeah. I love... So the quick story about the guys that started Google, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they one of the best lessons. I don't know if have I talked about Larry Page's lesson about failing quickly on the show?
I don't think so.
So when they asked Larry Page, entrepreneurship advice, he talks about failing quickly. That's like his thing. And if you think about it, I would say that's like generally how we operate at Share Practices. I mean, we just got out of a meeting where we failed quickly on like 3 different things.
Yeah.
And we just moved on like, hey, plans change. We were wrong. Boom, boom, boom. And so Google started as a pizza online ordering platform.
I love the origins of these giant companies, like how Amazon was a book delivery service for like a long time, and then before they became what they are now.
Wait, I've talked about that on the show, haven't I?
Probably, yeah.
So I got to get to that next. So I mean, the light banter might turn into a little bit unlight banter, but so pizza delivery service, it failed quickly, and then they moved on to organizing the internet because it was so difficult to set up a pizza ordering service online that they're like, the internet needs to be organized, and that's what led to the search engine. So he talks about that, but Amazon, that was intentional. Did you not know that?
To start with books?
No, Jeff Bezos started with books with this vision in mind. He didn't call it like Barnes Noble bookstore. He called it Amazon, like the forest with everything.
Right.
From the beginning, because he started with books because logistically he thought that would be an extremely hard thing to organize. And if he could figure out books, then he could start scaling into other things. So that the books was an entry point that was extremely strategic. I think it's honestly, of everything I've heard, one of the best, just the best vision from an entrepreneur to have one of those large companies, to see it from the beginning. Applause to Jeff Bezos. Can you hit the applause button?
I sure can.
Yeah. Jeff Bezos. Vision, there, books. Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, it really deserves it.
And Google is now the 70% of all search goes to Google.
Yeah, I mean, they dominate the internet in terms of volume.
Yeah.
And they make all their money on pay per click. That's like a very extremely large percentage of the revenue.
Most of their revenue.
Yeah. So Google, YouTube, thank you guys very much for bringing us a show and bringing all of our listeners valuable COVID-19 content in the Learn More link below.
Time for banter.
So light banter. So this ad got me thinking about a funny topic. And so I think that one thing we want to make people aware of is, right, people give the media so much credibility. And so it is one of our objectives on a biased, narrative-based media show.
Very biased here.
Yeah. To run our bias.
See, we own our bias. They reject theirs.
So our bias is sort of anti-mainstream media. And we kind of had a dig at Matt Ford last episode. What was it again? I forgot what it was.
I was reading my COVID myths, and one of them being that we could vaccinate ourselves out of this pandemic. And that's, of course, the Matt Ford viewpoint.
Oh, that's where it was. Yeah, I remember listening. I was like, ooh, that wasn't very nice.
I'm not here to be nice.
Okay, well, Matt Ford, I apologize.
I don't apologize.
So I got to tell you the story that I had at a golf lesson. So I'm at a golf lesson, and we were talking about like bullshit that you hear about golf swings. And he goes, let me tell you the story. So there was he was at a tournament, and they said something on TV that was like totally wrong.
They do that a lot. If you like know a lot about golf, the commentators say the wrong things a lot.
Yeah, like swing mechanic stuff that's just total bullshit.
they don't like when golfers hit it too far on the drive, and they say they have like 50 or 60 yards to the hole, when it's been statistically shown that the closer you are to the hole in your second shot is the best spot you need to be. So they'll like champion people who hit 3-woods and irons off the tee because they're in the fairway, versus like you're much more accurate to the hole 50 yards in the rough than you are 100 yards in the fairway. Like it's just completely wrong.
So, I think everyone, and this goes back to like, have you ever watched like, a lot of dentists in the audience? Have you ever watched dentistry on TV? Like, have you ever seen the news talk about dentistry?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean we're dealing with one right now with the implant story in Phoenix.
Oh yeah, we should talk about that, right?
Yeah.
So this lady, who owns some type of company that for some reason has an incentive to denigrate biomedical materials, sends a story to the local news here in Arizona, talking about the failures of implants and how they're skyrocketing year over year, and how in America there was no failures on dental implants 15, 25 years ago.
That's weird.
And it's like, well, fact check. There were no implants being placed 25 years ago.
At least very little of them.
And implants take years to fail. And so, like, she just used hundreds of thousands of failures year over year going up, not to acknowledge the millions of implants being placed. It was one of the most biased, like, misleading stories of information that we had to address. And it was a big problem. And it goes back to the whole point of like, the purpose of media is not to be accurate. That is not the objective. It's to get views, to make money, and to get listened to. Like, that's the purpose.
Well, here's a good lens. If you're looking at a media story, especially in the local news, and you're like, this isn't really interesting. Like, I wonder why they're talking about this. That story was probably spoon-fed by a corporate, by a company, by a person who has an incentive with that viewpoint, and they give that to the local reporter so they can run it, so their agenda can be pushed. So
yeah,
that's kind of a lens you can use to be like, that's not really, like, why are they talking about that?
I mean, this poor reporter got duped.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, her credibility is totally shot now, in my mind, right? Like, anything she says now, I'm like, well, you published that stupid story about dental implants. It was totally wrong. And they were just spoon-fed a story, and they're like, all right, well, like, I'm not making a lot of money. You know, I'm working here at the paper, and, like, this seems fascinating to the public. Like, let me share it, you know? And that just wasn't a good idea because of how unfactual it was. So we have 4 minutes until COVID corner. I'm going to tell the golf swing story.
Let's hear it.
So my golf coach is at a tournament, and he hears something that the media guy says. And he goes up to the media guy. He's like, hey, I have a question about, like, you said this thing, and it was like a technical thing about a swing that doesn't matter. And, like, can you explain that? Because it's kind of against what I thought. And he goes, no, that's just for TV.
Oh, my gosh. What?
He goes, don't buy that. That's for TV.
Is that because he's just trying to speak to like the lowest common denominator golfer? Like, what is the reason that's just for TV?
So I've been on the back end of a set before, and the way that they talk about it, it's kind of really concerning. So they'll be like, it's for the American public. It's for the people. The people don't understand that. The people just want a simplified explanation.
Do they? Do they really?
No.
Where are they getting that?
But there's a general vibe in mainstream media. Like, if you broadcast to more people, you inherently have to dumb down your content because, I mean, sorry, but statistically, like, you have to appeal to the mass audience's intelligence, not the, you know, upper echelon of, you know, like, is that offensive? Probably.
Can you just like predicate, like, for this golf thing? Couldn't you just say that, hey, this is what the common golfer should do? If you're a 10 handicap or less, maybe don't do that or something. Like, couldn't he just do one line of dialogue just to preface what he said that's, you know, false to people listening?
Well, don't you want to feel like you're following the advice of, like, the people that do this best?
Yes.
So why would you say that? That would be against views. That would be against the narrative. That would be against him being an expert. It's not because he knows so much that he's appealing. It's he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
I mean, at some points, experts do need to dumb down, like, their technical knowledge and package it in a way that people can understand it. We do that as dentists, right? Like, we dumb down the language we use to patients to make them understand it. But we are not intentionally misleading with that information, I would hope.
And the purpose from our show, right? Like, so let's talk about our show, right? Like, what are our narratives? So we talk about misinformation about COVID. That's a big, big narrative of ours. We talk about, you know, different. I think entrepreneurship is kind of hard to have like a narrative for because we just like to break down companies that we think are cool. But naturally, you're going to get my biases around Apple, right? Like, brand building companies based on like making a social movement out of your product. I just inherently will never like that because it's
that's so against where the world is moving, though. Like, every startup company, I watch Shark Tank a lot, and every single company that comes on there has a mission, has a foundation that they support. X number of money goes to here. Like, that's like a necessity for startups these days.
Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where did it go where we could just like run our business the better? Like, for me,
Nope, sorry.
You know, the bias you'll get on this show is I am extremely operationally driven. You know, the business operations on the back end is for and I'm going to do a case study on this now.
Oh, good.
So after COVID Corner, which is coming up here in 40 seconds.
All right. Best time of the episode.
You want to get out your notes?
Yeah, I should.
So the reason we talk about media in anticipation of COVID Corner is because of the fact that naturally the reason why we feel like we need to hammer this home every week is because people are getting false information every week from news outlets. And if we at the kind folks on the $1 Billion Podcast are unwilling to, you know, go out there and, you know, at the, like, John, our producer, he was like, hey, like, isn't this kind of like hurtful to the company to be saying all this stuff on air? I'm like, yes, it is. And we choose that because we believe so passionately in being authentic. And so, Matt, Can we have our COVID corner?
Oh, we sure can. I have a lot of different stuff on here, so it's going to be a little bit like bouncing back and forth between different things.
I think that if they have me talking on this show, they're used to bouncing back and forth between. I mean, I just bounce back and forth between 5 different things.
Yeah. So first one, in the topic of the media, actually, this perfectly segues in how you see the media talk about rising cases differently in different states, right? Like when Florida spiked over the summer, what was all the rhetoric in the media? DeSantis and his inability to, put restrictions in play that would stop the spread of the virus are the reason why cases are spiking. Well, now, as predicted first on the $1 Billion Podcast months ago, you're welcome, the Northeast and the Midwest are spiking right now. So what is
you called this?
Yeah. I told you, I follow people on Twitter who are data scientists who very easily and predictably can predict when cases will spike in certain states.
So this is something that I think people need to understand. Can you talk about the value of Twitter? Because I think that if you want objective information, Twitter is one. So can you talk about who you follow, those types of things?
So it's just kind of the same with Reddit and with Twitter, in that if you follow people that are going to educate you about a certain area you're interested in, it can be really well used. You can learn a lot from it. Like I follow a lot of crypto people on there. I follow a lot of finance people on there. I follow a lot of COVID people obviously on there. And if you subscribe to certain subreddits in that topic and you kind of sift through the comments to find like the really good pearls, like it can be really enhancing to your knowledge. So as long as you're using Twitter in kind of that kind of way, you're following people very strategically. You don't fill your timeline with a lot of like,
you can't follow mainstream accounts.
Yeah, mainstream or your friends. Like if you're going for that reason, it's very educational. It's one of the best places I spend on my phone.
I think anyone with over 1 million followers, you probably shouldn't follow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, people like Nate Silver even I have to unfollow because they just their views are so mainstream and that they're not like really usually supportive of your own beliefs and all that. But anyways. So when these cases in the Northeast and Midwest spike, what do you think, George? Did they blame the governors in those states?
Well, they can't blame the governors because the governors are doing everything they can to stop the spread. So
they're doing everything they can, and DeSantis can't govern all these states, so we can't blame DeSantis, right, for a spike in Michigan. So what do? They finally start talking about seasonality. Article in The Athletic just dropped yesterday, saying that, I guess it's seasonality on why cases rise. So why is it differently when cases rise in the Northeast and the Midwest? It's seasonality, but when it's in Florida, it's because that red Trumper governor is killing all his citizens.
The Athletic isn't even a mainstream media.
I know.
Like, you don't even have the big boys talking about this?
No, the seasonality, you'll see it. It's starting to be in the news more, and you know why. Because when it comes to a blue state, they will treat them differently. They will talk about seasonality, which we all know has been a thing since the very beginning. They won't demonize the governors like they will in Florida. And it is just complete media bias and just completely misleading the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if one thing we'd like to hammer home on this show, we would like to highlight these issues about media.
Yes. And speaking about DeSantis, so he just signed a law prohibiting the employer vaccination mandate. Now, George, do you know where he signed the law?
No.
In Brandon, Florida. Now, that's just good comedy. I mean, you can support it or not, but that's just funny.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
That was a little tidbit I thought I'd share.
Oh no. That is such a fuck you. Oh, okay. Do we want to explain that to our audience, or do you think it's mainstream enough that everyone knows what that is?
No, I think most people...
Let's go, Brandon.
Yeah, we'll explain it real quickly. At a NASCAR race, they were chanting, whether you like it or not, F you to our president. And a reporter, rather than say what they were actually chanting, said that they were saying, let's go, Brandon being the name of a NASCAR racer in the race. So then... Oh,
the reporter didn't actually think that they were chanting that?
No, he just didn't want to say it on TV and probably didn't support it himself, which I have no problem with. But then, since then, the Brandon movement has kind of taken off, and it's been kind of like a defiance to our government and the policies that have put us in this place. So it's like a rallying cry.
Well, and you mentioned something that Biden tweeted yesterday. I was following my Twitter feed, and I saw that you had brought something up. Is that where we're going next?
That's not where we're going next.
Okay.
But I will talk about that soon. No, we saw a lot of great things in the world happen over the weekend. Do you know what they are?
Oh, I missed them all.
You missed them because they weren't reported, or you just...
Probably both.
Oh, that's not for you. They weren't reported. So In more than 20 countries across Europe and across Australia, we had mass protests this weekend. I'm talking like 30 to 50,000 people showing up in centers, some areas of violence, some mostly just peaceful protesting the vaccine mandates. And it's just something you'll never see really reported in the news. I mean, countries like Belgium, Croatia, Italy, Australia, on down the list, country after country, marching, protesting, huge protests against these vaccine mandates. And it's just, again, it's media bias to not show that's happening. But it's, you as a listener know that it is widespread that people across the world are up in arms about the green pass and the vaccine mandates, and they don't support it, and they're making themselves known.
So I think anytime somebody's watching the news, start thinking about why are they talking about this? Don't focus on what they're talking about. Focus on why they're talking about it.
I have a great segue to that. Okay, so Fauci came out recently and said that we are not yet going to change the definition of fully vaccinated. So the boosters are now available for all adults, but they're not yet changing the definition of fully vaccinated to include a booster shot. Now, what is Fauci doing there? He's floating to the public what he wants to do and what he plans to do to hear the reaction. This is something that media does a lot. They'll kind of put out there what they're thinking about doing to gauge public reaction to it. And if the public reaction is positive, they'll go forward with it. If they get a lot of pushback on it, they won't put it into play. This is something you see across media outlets. Whenever you see something like yet or may or all that, that's very intentional to gauge public opinion on the thing they're trying to do.
So what is the public reaction to the booster necessity?
Probably supporting it. But the reason why, and if you're thinking, okay, we have the boosters available for all adults, why hasn't the fully vaccinated thing changed? Because everything about the performance of the vaccine shows that after 6 months, the vaccine performance pretty much wanes. So I got my vaccine in February. I'm not fully vaccinated, according to the performance of the vaccines. According to the U.S. government, I'm still fully vaccinated. But the reason why they wouldn't want to do that is if we changed the definition of fully vaccinated, we would go from 60% of Americans fully vaccinated, to 35%. So you think about how they could continue the rhetoric against the unvaccinated if now the unvaccinated is the majority. That was what would happen if they changed the definition. So that's why they're not doing it. So they're not following the science. They're just following, they can't just condemn the unvaccinated if the unvaccinated is 65% of the country.
So now do you expect that a booster will be given or a booster will be required?
Yes, absolutely. I would give it probably a month and a half. It will be required. No, not required, but for the definition.
The definition of fully vaccinated.
Will include a booster. Yeah.
And it's 6 months after the vaccine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so stupid.
So I have a clip. It's going to take me a second to pull it up, but this is the most I see a lot of shocking things over the course of a week as I prepare for COVID Corner. This legitimately made my jaw drop. Okay?
Wow.
It dropped.
So I think last time I played a clip, I didn't do it loud enough.
I actually heard it fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn up. Okay, hang on.
Okay, you got to put the mic.
Hang on. Bear with me, people. Okay. So to preface this is the CDC director, Raquel Walensky. You know her as my favorite woman in the world. I'll let it play, then we'll talk about it.
Have you seen examples of this kind of focused protection work either, other countries here in the United States at other times? Is this something that we know can work?
Well, that's actually my biggest challenge with it, is I think that this is what Sweden tried to do. This was their plan. What we know from Sweden is that their death rate, their per capita death, is 591 per million. That rivals the United States at 593 per million. To give you a sense of what lockdowns were able to do in other countries, and I mean really strict lockdowns, in China, their death rate is 3 per million. So when you look at what Sweden was trying to do and what they are trying to emulate in Sweden, it didn't work. They were unable to protect them.
Have you seen?
That was the CDC director saying the words, what lockdowns can do. And I'm talking about strict lockdowns like what China did. That is our CDC director supporting strict lockdowns as the best way to thwart this virus. Literally, it legitimately made my jaw drop. And the figure she quotes is so clearly false. China, a country of 1.4 billion, has not recorded a COVID death since May of 2020.
Yeah.
You tell me if that's
the fact
true.
that she calls that credible. I mean, everyone knows that they're not reporting.
So she honestly thinks that the death rate in China is 3 per million versus 590 per million in the United States. She honestly thinks that their strict lockdowns made them that much better at reducing COVID deaths.
I mean, does she actually think that, or is she saying that?
I mean, she said it like what? It's legitimately shocking that she would even say that.
So what was her point about Sweden?
I was so shocked by the China thing. I don't know.
Because it seems like what she was saying is the lockdown did they lock down Sweden?
No, so Sweden was the only country really that avoided all lockdowns, all restrictions, no mask mandates, no closing businesses. They only just recently started with the vaccine pass.
So I think what she was saying is Sweden doing nothing rivaled their death rate of the United States doing lockdowns. I think she was saying lockdowns are not needed.
No.
Is that not what she was saying?
No, it was not what she was saying.
She's suggesting a lockdown.
Yes, she was saying,
citing China.
She wishes that she could have done a stricter lockdown in America so we could have numbers that rival China because they did so much better than us.
Why don't we just stop reporting like China? That's how we can get their numbers. That's insane.
It's just absolutely absurd.
Is that even contrary? Like, I feel like that's pretty widely known now that China stopped reporting COVID deaths.
I mean, so we can't use their statistics as anything but that. They're clearly false reporting them.
Yeah.
So why are we trying to do anything that they're doing?
She's just trying to divide it by 200. Number of
yes.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
That's terrible.
I actually had another thing that made my jaw drop. Okay, so the Australian Army is now transferring positive COVID cases and close
I saw this.
and close contacts to quarantine camps.
That's horrible.
They are putting people in camps.
COVID camps?
In legitimately camps. They're taking them on an army truck to a camp.
That's so... Is it just all positive cases?
All positive and close contacts. So your 10-year-old George...
Since when did Australia become like this? I mean, I never thought of all the countries that they would be these guys.
There's probably people smarter than I who could have saw that coming from Australia, just based on their history. But just imagine your 10-year-old getting on an army truck and going to a quarantine camp.
Did they put under 18?
I don't know. I don't read that much into it. Just the fact that it exists and they're actually doing it is shocking. And conspiracy theorists, we catch a lot of flack. And I am one of them. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm not afraid to say it.
I heard a term that I love. Conspiracy realists.
Thank you. Conspiracy realist. We catch a lot of flack. We catch a lot of flack. Everything we've said about this pandemic has turned out to be true. We talked about vaccine mandates and vaccine cards back early in 2020. People called us crazy. We talked about things like quarantine camp. People call us crazy. We're talking right now about things like social credit and like having each person has a score. They're calling us crazy now. We'll see what happens.
So, I think that this is something that we need to acknowledge as a society, is when something happens that makes our government look bad, we will not find out about it until all the people involved in that decision are either out of office or have passed away. That's like American history, time and time and time again, right? Like every time there's a conspiracy, it's not like, so this is the thing, as a society, I think we need to know, right? There's a few truths that we need to keep holding true to us. We cannot trust what we're being told, right? I think that's time and time again come out to be accurate. So as critically thinking citizens and individuals, we need to take it upon ourselves to look at all of the things that are happening and connect our own dots. If you cannot trust what you're being told, you are forced to do that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Who can we trust in our government regarding this issue or others as well? I mean, I think that what they've really shown in COVID, because COVID's backed by science. So, like, they're lying about science, which just shows how they lie. And now you're like, okay, and then you look at other areas of what they're saying and you trust them less too, right? Because you understand the way it works a little bit more. I mean, COVID taught me a lot about how the government works, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to create long-standing distrust in government organizations, specifically in public health realm. Like, it will take decades and decades for them to regain public trust. Places like the CDC, they could say anything, and I'm going to do the opposite going forward. Like,
I mean, but think about the flip side is like they said whatever they wanted before and no one listened to them.
Yeah, I know. Can we get back to that? Can we stop listening to Anthony Fauci and the CDC? These people are clearly lying to us. It
Yeah,
is so blatant.
The fact that they think of him as a qualified scientist is just baffling.
He's 82. You know when Biden runs for re-election, which he's been telling people he's going to do? He's going to be 83.
Jeez.
83. The most like rigorous position.
Well, I mean,
biggest leadership challenge in the world is going to be led by an 83-year-old.
I mean, I think that if there's ever a term to have a president that's elderly, it would be this one because he doesn't move a whole lot anyway. He stays up in Delaware. He doesn't travel. It's easy on his body. Like this is the term. COVID is the term for the stay-at-home president.
I guess true. And he just saw the doctor and he got a clean bill of health. They said he's ready for another run.
Mental health through the roof.
Yeah. Last couple of quick things. I'm almost done.
Yeah.
So the White House press secretary Jen P. She came out again and told businesses to defy the stay in the courts. So that 6th Court of Appeals in Cincinnati, as we talked about last time, has put a stay on the vaccine mandates for employers of over 100 people. She came out again telling businesses to defy a court.
Yeah.
Now, what you're seeing there, that's a totalitarian government. That's what a totalitarian government would do. They would defy a branch of the federal government, the judicial branch. They're advocating people to defy it.
So this I mean, our transitions today, A+ so far.
Oh, you got one coming too?
Yeah, I got this. Is bleeding perfectly into Narcos, which is the next segment on the show.
Go for it.
So let me just first we got.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Before you continue. So next episode of COVID Corner, I'm going to have a deep dive into the effect of COVID on our children, our most vulnerable population, the one who is taking the brunt of the restrictions currently. So get ready for a nice deep dive into that next time.
Is that going to be a 15-minute or a 30-minute?
I'm going to do the whole thing. So I won't have up-to-date COVID stuff next week. I will have fully. We're just focusing on our children.
So it's a 15-minute deep dive on kids.
Yes.
Perfect. Guys, you know what my favorite part of COVID Corner is? Hearing you talk so passionately.
I'm very passionate.
Yeah. If nothing else, you don't have to listen to the words. The tone is just amazing with COVID Corner. I love the tone.
It gets me riled up.
Yeah, clearly. So now what we've been talking about, right, is mistrust of government. Mm-hmm. And if you ever want to not trust the government, you got to watch Narcos Mexico. So let me talk about Narcos. So Narcos is a series on Netflix. And Netflix, the thing I love about what Netflix producers, how big of a fan of Netflix are we?
I'm huge.
Huge fans. Not just like of the content. I'm not like sitting on Netflix all day at my house. That's definitely not what I'm talking about. The company themselves, their mission, their vision, their values, and the way that they produce content. So one of the things from a business angle that Netflix does is they reduce the cost of content by not hiring well-known actors. And they find interesting historical stories that you don't have to get good screenwriters. You just get historians. Mm-hmm. I don't need these people with an imagination. Let's just talk about all the crazy shit that's already happened.
Yeah, there's a lot that's happened.
So they go and they find these really cool nuggets of history, and then they make shows about them. And so Narcos has had now 6 seasons.
Is that because they want more content for the same spend rather than big budget stuff for smaller?
So they want, right. So what is the purpose of Netflix? It's to retain your customers on the subscription service. And so to retain customers on the subscription service, you have to release new content to keep them there because they're looking forward to the next season of Ozarks. Right. At least I am. I love all things drug related, drug business, drug laundering. I am like a money laundering.
I had a dream about drugs last night.
Yeah, I don't like doing drugs. That's not the thing. But the business of drugs I love, and illegal drugs. I don't like pharmaceutical business a whole lot because it's a lot of. They're both corrupt in different ways. But so Narcos has. Season 1 and 2 on the original Narcos are Pablo Escobar. So you learn about who, in my mind, he was the richest man of the world at his time. So in the 80s, Pablo Escobar was, richest man of the world. He was the guy shuttling coke through Florida. He went to Cuba, then he went to Florida, and, up through the East Coast. So if you look at different parts of the country, they're addicted to different drugs. So you're right. You have the Southeast was cocaine driven due to the Miami entry point of cocaine. You have the Northeast as opioids because they were to get opioids over the Atlantic Ocean, right? So through many different routes, opioids would make their way up to New York City, and then they would deviate from there. So these major ports were imports for large drugs. The Mexico would get marijuana up through the Mexican border. They'd grow marijuana in Mexico. and then they would put it up. So you got Southern California, right? A lot of marijuana up in the western part of the country. And those are really the large drugs in the United States. And then you have methamphetamine is in the middle of the country, not away from a border, because that's made in the States. So you have labs that make meth. So for anyone who needs kind of a general baseline of drugs, you think of it as trade, right? It's trade from foreign countries, and don't stigmatize it. We're not using drugs. This is a business, okay? And that's
actually very consistent, because in the Northeast, when I grew up, opioids were the big problem.
Yeah.
Even, in
heroin,
the
right? Heroin use.
Heroin, opioids,
And so the way that drugs work is they exploit sort of the, lowest socioeconomic class of society in each of the parts of the world, except for cocaine. So cocaine was sort of like the
rich people drug.
Rich people drug, exactly. White collar drug. The other ones are all like super blue collar, like even below a blue collar. Is there a term for that? Like a socially acceptable term to use?
Well, that's why people go from like opioid pills, and they start to not be able to afford those, and that's why they go to heroin, which is much cheaper, much more addictive, and
exactly
leading to much worse outcomes.
And so the goal for every drug dealer is to be able to sell a dose of whatever for like $5, because you have someone who's homeless, or you have someone who cannot afford to pay like a lot of money for drugs, and they need to get their stuff. So they dilute it and they add other things and fillers and stuff to get the high for a different dollar amount. So that's if anyone wants to know, I'll talk about crack cocaine for a minute here. That's what crack cocaine is. It's taking a $400 worth of cocaine and making it $2,000 of crack in quick $10 increments, right? So it's a way for someone, and that's done in the States. So they'll get cocaine in the States, and then a crack dealer will dilute it and make it into a bunch of crack and sell it. So anyway, that's what we need to know about the drugs themselves. Now let's talk about the business. So Pablo Escobar is the most innovative, ambitious man in the world, right? So think of the challenge of getting to Pablo Escobar. So if you watch Narcos, I'm going to kind of spoiler alert parts of it for you. I mean, it's history, right? I'm spoiler alerting history. So it's not a spoiler alert. We all know he died.
Show's been out for a long time.
Yeah, sorry, you had your chance. So he was in this town of Colombia called Medellin. And, he had like the whole entire army he was a politician. Did you know that? He was in Congress. Oh. He owned a soccer team. Like, this guy is one of the most wanted men in the world, openly walking around Congress, walking around the public. Like, the dude was not hiding at all. And so the reason is because the U.S. couldn't get to him. Like, you have armies. He had armies around him all the time. Like, he owned the army. Like, these guys just bought protection from the police, from everyone. And if you're driving in Medellin, he has these guys who literally their full-time job is to sit on top of buildings and watch cars go through the city and report on where they're going. So if you're a DEA agent, they know you, and they're like, he's there. And they're just watching you go the whole time, and they're documenting all of your movements. That's the reality of doing business as an American for the DEA in Colombia. So needless to say, the DEA, right? Like, you think of like the public. So what happened is cocaine was like the DEA did not give a shit about drugs. They did not care one bit until Pablo Escobar, because he came in and did two things. White collar, for the first time, was negatively impacted, right? You have politicians losing their kids. You have these people that mattered in government getting affected by cocaine. It was the first drug that infiltrated the white collar class. Second thing is the amount of money cocaine makes is logarithmic scale to all other drugs. So you got now an amount of money leaving the United States economy going into Colombia, right? So you have billions of dollars leaving. So, he had like teens of billion-dollar business with extremely high margins leaving from the United States to Colombia. The impact that has on our GDP and our economy and everything, it's massive, right? If you're a government, you want other people's money to come into your country and stay in your country. That's how you get tax rates. That's how you get all these things, right? And he's evading a ton of taxes. So Pablo Escobar was the first guy to piss off the government. And so they go over there and they kill him eventually. And then the third season first seasons 1 and 2 are all about Pablo Escobar. Season 3 is all about the Cali cartel. It's the other cartel in Colombia that took over after Escobar died. So they were kind of in the works, and then he died and left the floor open, and they took over. So that's the first 3 series of Narcos. It's all Colombia. That I found moderately interesting, but the DEA in Colombia was ethical-ish, right? Like, they wanted Pablo Escobar. They were on the side of the people because of all the cocaine. Mexico is an entirely different story. The DEA down there was a sham. Like, it was literally a pretend entity. Like, they did not give a shit at all. They were pretty much told to, like, let it happen.
Right.
Like, they were told to not stop it because it was marijuana. So, it was marijuana. No one cared. Then, the war on drugs started. Do you know what started the war on drugs? Do you even know what the war on drugs is? So this was something that was sold to the public as like the United States effort to keep drugs off the street. Yep. Do you know how ineffective they have been at keeping drugs off the street?
Yes, very.
They have kept no drugs off the street.
None.
And they have these big busts. They go in the media. Yeah, but like realistically, the DEA has been like one of the least effective things. So the war on drugs did not start until the Mexican cartel killed a DEA agent.
Ooh, that's a no-no. Can't do that.
They did not care. So what happened is the cartel in Mexico was led by this guy named Felix Gallardo, and he was in with the Mexican government. So these guys in Mexico City, the pretty much like high-end politicians, were getting paid by the cartel to allow them to get military protection, to allow them to get cocaine. Once they got to cocaine, that's when things started going poorly. So they were fine with marijuana. No one bothered them. It was literally just like this little business that no one cared about, just a bunch of farmers. And then this guy, his name is Kiki Camarena, he was a DEA agent for the United States. He went and burned like it was the largest field. In Mexico, they had the largest marijuana field in the history of like harvesting marijuana ever in Mexico. It was in the middle of a desert. They found this really cool water source. And this guy, the DEA agent, just totally burned the whole thing down. He found it, he burned it down.
Jeez.
The DEA agent in Mexico, this guy, tried hiring a plane to fly over this area that he was suspecting there was a field. And the U.S. department that was flying the plane wasn't going to do it because they knew what was there. So they sent him false pictures of the field before it was built.
Wow. Like
the U.S. government was actively trying to hide the marijuana operation from the DEA agents in Guadalajara that were investigating this.
Because why would they want to do that?
Washington didn't. For some reason, there was an incentive from Washington that they didn't want to find this, and they didn't care about it. I don't know why, but Washington did not want this to be a problem.
How did he end up finding it?
So he ended up finding it by literally going there and pretending to be a farmer. And he just like, you have to put a bag over your head to go there. So they pick you up from a location. They take you on a bus with a bag over your head. And so one thing that agents are trained to do is when there's a bag over the head, they count. And so they count how long it takes in seconds to get to a destination. Then they have a radius. So he knew the destination and the radius. And then he made them. He's like, I just had you fly over this shit. So then because he went to the field, he knew the pictures were false. And then they actually did a proper flyover and they saw the whole thing and the scale of it. And they're like, this is fucking massive.
Wow.
And then they went and burned it down. The Mexican cartel got pissed. The politicians in Mexico got pissed and they were afraid of what he knew. So they captured him and they tortured him so bad he died.
Ugh.
Like cardiac arrest. They tortured him so bad that he died. That is what started the war on drugs. The United States did not give one shit about anything that was happening until they killed a DEA agent. The war on drugs killed more DEA agents than they got mad, emotionally mad, and they sent agents down there to get seizures to hurt. So then they started hurting their business by seizing drugs. So then they started catching drugs. Then they started arresting people. Then they started doing stuff. And more United States agents died doing that.
So then they killed more DEA agents.
They killed more DEA agents, and they hurt the business financially, but they created more violence in Mexico, and they created the same amount of drugs in the United States.
Success?
Apparently. So all I'm saying is, I guess this is really an ad for Narcos, the series. Like, in my mind, I would pick it up at Narcos Mexico, because that's where you learn about the corruption of both governments, right? And then essentially, you know what ends the war on drugs?
No.
NAFTA. Do you know what NAFTA is?
No.
The trade deal between the United States and Mexico. So the United States and Mexico are going through this drug war, and it's a war between the two countries, like the Cold War, right? Like modern wars, COVID, Cold War, drug war. They're not actually fought. Like World War II was the last time we're just going to like obliterate each other's.
Get on a battlefield. And
yeah, like that is the last time we're going to do that.
Yeah.
All wars from now on will be fought in espionage, viruses. Like that's the future of war. And every war since then, including the war on drugs, is a political battle between economies and stuff like that. That's the war on drugs. And so the truce that they made, formally ending or informally ending the war on drugs if the U.S. stopped, like really trying to harass them, was a trade deal called NAFTA, where the U.S. exploits Mexico for a ton of produce. Like, we just exploit them. Like, an avocado in the United States costs less than an avocado in Mexico. In
really?
Some situations. Yeah.
So it was purely emotion-based then. And how long did this war on drugs go for?
So it was between the 80s and 90s. So I'm not actually sure on the exact time, because it was a behind-the-scenes, right? They don't, like, publish a day. Like, World War I, II, those are actually documented in history. Mm-hmm. So because of the corruption that was behind the scenes of the war, you don't actually have finite dates, because the public was held in the dark of a lot of the actual things that were happening. And so my favorite part is these DEA agents that retire. So think of it from the perspective of a DEA agent. You are down there fighting this war, and you ask for resources. You ask for them to prosecute these people you're finding, and they don't, because of the politics between the two countries. The domestic ambassadors are the ones that really kill a lot of the DEA progress. So by the time these DEA agents are retired, they're pissed.
I bet. Oof.
And so they go to Netflix, they go to these documentaries, and they talk about how corrupt it is in both countries. It's not like the U.S. is the only corrupt, like all of the countries, right? They're all corrupt. And so these DEA agents that had they lost people. Like, they lost men that they're like soldiers, right? They're like, this is national service, it's very similar to the army or the military. And like for the lack of, so it really, and I hope that there's more people in the military and more people in the institutions of government after they've retired, and they're no longer going to tour, because the problem is you can't talk about it when you're in it, because they threaten you by chaining you behind. They call it, I'll chain you to a desk for the rest of your career. That's what they use as a threat in Washington. If you don't behave and you don't follow what they're telling you to do, regardless of what you believe, they're going to put you behind a desk doing paperwork in the bureaucracy for the rest of your career, and that's all you can do. So that's how they get people to listen. And like, if you, do you know what the funny part is? I got a funny tangent here. So the guy that tortured the DEA agent was trained by the United States.
Oh, that's poetic justice, I believe they call that.
So the United States lent a hand to Mexico, and our torture techniques, we taught them our torture techniques to them. And they ended up doing that to our own agent.
This really shows the value of new media. Like, one way this can manifest is like people having phones. Like, now everything that happens on the street, something corrupt or some kind of police brutality perhaps, is recorded. And this is like another value of people like Netflix, where they're making documentaries on, although they have to go in the past, like they come to light. And that's why not all media is bad.
No, and that's why, like, do you know what they discredit? In school, were you allowed to use Wikipedia as the site of source?
No.
Why not?
Because it's from the, who knows who wrote that stuff. Anyone can edit Wikipedia.
Yeah, anyone can edit Wikipedia. So open source is what it's referred to as. Mm-hmm. There's no author.
Right.
So open source, right? Frown on Wikipedia. Frown on Twitter as a source of information. I would argue Twitter is the single most accurate news outlet in the world. Would you agree?
I would agree. Yeah.
Because you're not choosing to follow institutions with agendas. You're choosing to follow people that you trust.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't believe have the biases that the organization would.
Exactly.
Don't have the agendas.
And so you get these people that objectively will find information and share it on Twitter. I mean, Twitter is like a very idealistic movement of like these small, like if you're in a small Twitter community, It's like a really I just started the crypto one. I started getting. I'm really crypto's fascinating.
I'll give you a name of a great one.
Yeah, I now follow like 50 or 60 crypto accounts, and I love. I mean, it's such a fascinating world, and it's so idealistic.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing with this whole thing with Twitter with the COVID news, right? Like you get actual information. And I think, I don't know, I view Reddit as less credible. Do you think Reddit is less? I mean, Reddit, I like to see someone's followers. If I go somewhere and they've got 6,000, 7,000 people following them, 8,000, 9,000, like I'm like, okay, like other people think that they're decent. But if you get too many, then you know that they're biased.
Reddit takes more sifting through comments. You have to know which comments to follow and which to not. And that takes a little bit more legwork because you're taking advice from people you have no idea who they are.
And I hate on Reddit how you have like, someone comments something and then you get like a bunch of bullshit jokes and like banter and stuff. Like,
I don't read that stuff.
Yeah, like I don't like that I have to keep scrolling through the garbage.
If you look at actually the controversial comments, that's usually where the best nugget of information is. But actually, in the more practical way, the best way to use Reddit, you're traveling to a city, Google, and you want like Mexican food, say, Google best Mexican food, Phoenix, Reddit. And now you have local people from that area saying what restaurants are best. Do that for any type of food in any city. It works great.
Can I, I'm going to go on a steakhouse rant here.
Okay.
So there's classes of steakhouses. So I was explaining this to John, our producer. So I've now ranked them in, you want to close the door, Matt?
I got it.
So I've ranked steakhouses in tiers. So there's tier 1, there's tier 2, and then there's tier 3.
Ooh.
So, and then I have like an elite class of steakhouses. So I'm a steakhouse guy. I like to just call a spade a spade. And so I got to the point now where I've been working on this for months. The number of 8-ounce fillets I've ordered is insane. I go to a steakhouse and I get the same thing every time. I find barometer meals. So I find these objects. So it's twofold. I got to enjoy the food because I'm ordering it and eating it. Right. And then the same thing is I get the same thing at every steakhouse so I can compare themselves. And I can compare their business model, all that stuff. So when I go to a steakhouse, I get the crab cakes.
Good.
An 8-ounce filet. Kaylee will order something. She actually has variety in her diet. Then we get French fries, mac and cheese.
Wow.
That's the order.
Not a green to be seen on that plate.
No.
Pure starch and protein.
No. So actually, this is my philosophy on diet is I behave in my regular life. So like every time I'll operate every day at a calorie deficit.
You have cheat meals.
I'll carbless my because the meals that you don't think about, like the functional meals. Like Suzanne and I are gonna have lunch right now. I'm gonna get a salad, right? Like I already know that it's a chicken salad. Like I'll behave there. But then you get me in like a place I enjoy, a steakhouse. I'm not gonna calorie count. I'm gonna get whatever the hell I want for one meal, and I do that twice a week. That's sort of my thing. Mm-hmm. So with steakhouse, it's those 5 things. So I can now tell. I have now you barometer them on multiple levels. Price. So like crab cake, typically a good one's like $22. Mm-hmm. Just is what it is. A 8-ounce filet, if you're not paying in 55, 52 in certain markets, mid 50s or higher, you're not getting a quality cut of meat. If you're getting in the 40s, that's like so there's 2 distinct classes of steakhouses I've noticed, and I've had them named tier 1, tier 2. And tier 1 steakhouse is usually, the way I define it is they don't offer gift cards. That's kind of the way of doing it. So steakhouses have 2 main types of customers. They have special occasion customers, and they have regulars. And so the steakhouses with regulars, those are going to be the better steakhouses because you're going to get someone that develops a palate that will be able to tell the quality. So the highest end margin of a steakhouse is the quality of the meat. Actually, their fixed costs on food is actually fair, or the variable costs on food are actually fairly high. So if I have a business model where I'm going to be more high volume, lower end, I'm going to be special occasion driven. I'm going to offer you the birthday promotion. So if a steakhouse ever says like, hey, why don't you put your name and email address here so that I can send you like a free dessert on your birthday or a free entree? You know that they're a tier 2 steakhouse. They offer gift cards. That's their model, and they're going to get lower quality cuts of meat to allow them to do that.
This is a little judgmental, but to bring it to dentistry, like if you see an office that's advertising the $39 new patient special, that's probably going to be a lower quality office, no offense out there, than someone who doesn't have to offer that low cost thing.
And it's not like a $45 filet is cheap. It's expensive.
Right.
So if you're going to do the special occasion, They trick all of the special occasion people by thinking it's a steakhouse. They build the steakhouse environment. They do the whole thing. But like, this is what Landry's builds their whole business model on. So like Morton's, all the Landry's restaurants, those are usually, special occasion steakhouses. And so if you're going to go for a steakhouse, paying $45 for a filet or $55 for a filet,
No-brainer.
like you have to upgrade you're going to pay 20% more to go to a tier 1. But if it's a special occasion, or if you're doing it to be like, you got to treat yourself and get the actual like really great experience. So when you go on Google and you look at reviews for a steakhouse, you're going to see one steakhouse with like 1,000 reviews in the city. What do you think that is? Tier 1 or tier 2?
Tier 2.
Tier 2. Isn't that deceiving?
Yeah.
Because
you need less reviews.
You need less reviews
for the tier 1.
Higher stars. Because a tier 1, and then you look on their website. Are they really special occasion driven on their website, or are they like kind of no gift certificates on the website?
I have found that, in my 2 years in White Plains living in my house, we like to eat out a lot, and I would look for like nice newer restaurants on Google, and we ran through all of them, and then we stumbled upon like 3 or 4 that
are the best places.
Very little Google presence, and they were the best places. It really drove me insane.
So it's ironic, but you kind of have to go with each. You have to know how to tell for each type of cuisine what's the good food. And for actually sushi, for my Americanized palate, I actually like reviews. I think reviews on a high-end sushi place are an accurate indicator of that, because Yelp has a very sushi culture, right? Like Yelp, Google, like sushi is something you review. Steakhouse is not. So if you want steakhouse, like the one with a ton of reviews, that's a special occasion. They went there for their anniversary. Yeah. It was a special night. They were looking forward to it.
What do you think about this theory that in the number score too, there's a difference? Because if people are doing a special occasion, they're spending a lot of money. It's like a big deal for them. They're
very critical.
Very critical, because it's a big deal for them. They're putting,
Yeah.
So you're gonna get sometimes like a little bit of a lower review than that place really deserves, because this person just like cares about every little thing that happens.
But then also that person's not as knowledgeable on the type of food, right? Because they don't go as often.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, right, if you look at like a 1,200 review steakhouse and they offer gift cards, that is like tier 2 slam dunk. Like that is like a tier 2 steakhouse to a T.
Yeah.
And so price point. So in your markets, right, like test these things, look for them. Price points, number of reviews, gift cards, and you'll start to be able to tell there's a segmentation to that, higher end restaurant and part of town. You're going to want to go to a part of town where a tier 1 customer lives. They don't want to drive across town. Like a special occasion, you drive across town, right? You'll drive anywhere for your special occasion dinner. But a tier 1 customer, it's their weekly thing. They go very frequently. And so it's got to be near their house. So you want to go to areas where tier 1 steakhouses, they're usually all in a conglomeration near each other.
Huh. Interesting. I'm thinking of White Plains. I feel like the tier 1s were not like in the city center around all the other restaurants. They were kind of like...
They're in the affluent suburbs.
They were in the suburbs. They were like 7-minute drive out a little bit, but...
Yeah, near like the expensive homes.
Yeah.
Right? So you think of where expensive homes are located in those neighborhoods near the supermarkets, near like, it's like they're like local steakhouse, right? It's like those are the ones that are really good because they've got a customer that necessitates it. And so I was at this steakhouse, and it was funny because I went to the steakhouse in dental school. And I was like, oh man, that was like, I was so pissed. I'm like, the side is what? How many dollars is this side?
Yeah, that's
like,
a shock when you first see that
I'm
they
like,
don't come with sides.
Are you kidding? It doesn't come with sides? Like, I was like, no. I'm not getting a side here. Like, and then the filet was tiny.
Yeah, you just have a slab of meat and that's your meal.
And then I went back they have 2 locations. So I went to their other location, which is near my house. And I was like, this is a gift card steakhouse. Like, and I saw it through a different lens, having been like 6 years since I had been there. And so, I never thought that this would be something that, and Matt, you actually got me in on this. I was restaurant cheap for a long time.
Yeah.
And you flipped me because you were like, think of the monthly expense that is when you go 4 times and the value that has on your relationship, in your case, your marriage. And like, you've totally sold me on like a really nice date night experience where I just go enjoy food.
Yeah, and like you said, you spend 20% more, you get an entirely different experience and entirely different experience in your mouth as you're eating a much higher quality food and have a better time. It's just a no-brainer to not cheap out on those kind of things.
Yeah, so I think that, I've turned into a foodie, and it's like, I think that in general, people need to kind of be pointed at where they're going to spend their money. You can't be like spending money everywhere, right? You've got to pick like it's kind of like the diet thing. Like you're stingy in most places and you're kind of like conscious of money. And then there's a couple places where you let yourself go.
That's like me in golf. Like I will spend whatever it takes to get better at golf. I'll go to the range as many times as I want. I'll go play whatever courses to get better.
You buy the equipment, right?
Buy whatever.
You have new golf equipment.
Top end, custom made equipment, fit for me, whatever it takes.
Can you talk about my golf equipment?
Oh, it's horrendous. George is using a stock driver from probably Dick's Sporting Goods.
I bought it in dental school.
Yeah.
All my golf equipment's from dental school.
From 8 years ago. And if you're serious in golf, you need to have clubs fitted for your swing. That is a necessity. If you want to be really good at golf, you cannot go to Dick's, get a club off the rack, and expect to be good at golf. Like you have to, like everyone's swing's different. It needs to be tailored by a guy who knows what he's doing. And I have a great one in New York. I should see him sometime.
So I think for me, it's like, there's areas I don't spend money on, and I'm like relatively, and then there's areas where, this is matters to me. And, it's like, the thing that I always say, and I've talked to you about this before, future self wants current self to be happy, and like sports tickets, that was kind of like, I was kind of on the fence about it. And so I found this way of buying season tickets and selling them. I did great this weekend.
Oh, you did?
So nice. I was out of town. And so I sold a Friday night game and a Sunday game. And I tripled the ticket value for each of those.
Nice.
So essentially the revenue for 6 tickets with 2 games. So I got 4 free games out of that weekend. That was exciting.
Good on you, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
You're like, I don't care. Yeah, the season ticket experiment. So I'm building Kaylee's building a spreadsheet. And so Kaylee's a big spreadsheet person as an engineer. So we have a spreadsheet with like money in, ticket value at the night of ticket, and then after the season, I'll have a full report.
Oh, that's cool. I like
it's
that.
coming out profitable. So it's coming out as the games you go to, you get at a big discount, and the games you don't go to and sell, you'll sell for a profit. So the games you go to
I feel like free. The big differentiator will be their playoff run. If it's a deep playoff run, you're going to do great.
Well, I mean, the Suns right now are second in their division. So, realistically, they should be doing pretty well. So, I mean, because I get access to playoff tickets, I can buy a whole playoff package, get all of them. Anyway,
this is fun.
So, the $1 Billion Podcast. Do we want to sign off here?
Yeah.
That's how we're going to end? What a dry ending. Can we recap or something? Like, no, nothing. We just dry end like that?
No, we can do some more announcements. Please watch us on YouTube if you're listening on the podcast.
So we're releasing Fridays on YouTube.
Yeah, Friday night will be up on YouTube.
And then Sunday, there's the podcast. If you have YouTube Premium, another YouTube ad here, you can like turn off your phone and just fast forward.
And if you listen to other
we want views.
Tell your friends. And if you listen to other podcasts, they take this week off. We're here. We're putting it out day after Thanksgiving.
Do they take Thanksgiving off?
Oh my God, it's so
frustrating. We are in our football gear here. Aaron Rodgers, Packers play. When do the Packers play? Do they play? They're not a Thanksgiving team, right?
They are not.
Do they play?
This time.
They play the Lions on Thanksgiving?
No, Lions play the Bears.
Okay.
They might play on Thanksgiving. I should probably.
No, I don't think so.
Well.
Anyway, guys,
we're releasing episode.
This is the Black Friday special if you're listening on the on YouTube, and Sunday on the podcast. And so anyway, let's sign off now. bdppod.com. That's 2 P's in a row. bdp, another P, pod.com. Type it in, submit your question. Graham, Evan, where are you guys at? You've been listening to an episode of the $1 Billion Podcast. $1 billion hosts, $1 billion companies, $1 billion ideas. We'll see you next week.